guys, it's Julie Spencer, author of the Buxton Peak series. We are working our way through Buxton Peak, the early years, the prequel to my Buxton Peak trilogy, and we're starting into chapter 13. I hope that if you are liking these videos that you will give them a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and share the videos on social media so that others can know that they're there and enjoy them also. So, Buxton Peak, the early years. Chapter 13, Unexpected Reunion. Those guys must have thought church started at 11 o'clock instead of 10, Elder Fitzpatrick whispered with disdain. He had just sat down after delivering a talk about the happiness of devoting his life to missionary service. Even though Ian had been his new companion for over 3 months, he was still getting used to Elder Fitzpatrick's posh attitude. Ian didn't answer his companion, just leaned over to pick up the hymn book resting under his seat. He turned in his seat and looked at the wall where the numbers hung, indicating the page for the closing hymn. Ian fumbled through the hymn book, trying to find the correct page as the music from the organ began to play behind him. Before the opening line began, Ian glanced at the clock, which showed that it was 10 minutes after the hour. Even if that's the case, they're still late. Guess we need to go introduce ourselves after the meeting. They must be new. They sure don't look like regular churchgoers. Elder Fitzpatrick snickered. Who wears sunglasses and baseball caps to church? That grabbed Ian's attention, and he finally looked up and searched the back of the room to discover the 3 guys who had snuck into the back row of the chapel. Oh my gosh. What are they doing here? I know, geesh. Ian's missionary companion shook his head. Whatever happened to Sunday best? I can't believe they showed up here, Ian said through clenched teeth. I told them not to come visit me. You know those guys? They're my best mates, and you're right, they're not regular churchgoers. Ian purposely pulled his eyes back to the hymn book in his hands. Don't stare at them. People will turn around to see who you're looking at. Why does it matter if people know I'm looking at them? Elder Fitzpatrick leaned closer to Ian, clearly trying to keep his voice low. His eyes narrowed. What is it about these guys that has you so flustered? Oh, crud. Ian turned to his companion and bit his lower lip. You honestly don't know who I am, do you? You're Elder Taylor, my missionary companion for the past 3 months. I don't know who you are when you're home. Elder Fitzpatrick turned his head away. His eyebrows creased, and wearing a slight pout, he looked at Ian square in the eye, chin held high. I don't care who you are back home. You're a great missionary, and your testimony is powerful. Nothing else matters. Ian pursed his lips and nodded at his companion. Hold on to that, because your opinion of me is about to be shaken. The hymn ended, and both boys bowed forward and closed their eyes. Ian said his own silent prayer, barely listening to the older sister who was giving the closing prayer. Heavenly Father, he thought, help me get through these next few minutes and the challenges that will follow. Help me to continue to serve thee in all that I do. Help me to put blinders on to whatever problems back home have led my mates to seek me out. Give me the strength to get through this next year focused on thy work. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. The organ played softly in the background as members of the congregation began to shuffle around in their seats, lifting children off laps, talking quietly to one another, smiling at the people around them. No one seemed to notice the 3 young men sitting in the back of the chapel. Ian reached under his seat to grab his scriptures and slowly stood. He took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. Come on, he said. I'll introduce you to my mates. Elder Taylor. Elder Fitzpatrick put his hand on Ian's arm, turning him slightly and nodding. I look forward to meeting them. Ian nodded back, then he turned and walked to the back of the chapel. Kai stood and removed his sunglasses, stepping forward to close the last few steps, and met Ian in a tight hug. Ian choked back tears, but he cleared his throat and hugged Andy as well. Gary held back until they made room for him, and he joined the group hug. I've missed you guys so much, Ian whispered, and then stepped back and narrowed his eyebrows. He tried to force a scolding into his voice, but the nostalgia of seeing them was undisguised. What are you doing here? You need to come home, Gary pleaded. We can't do this without you, pal. You're not supposed to be doing anything without me, except practicing. Have you been practicing? We try, but it's not the same, Andy said. It's like you dropped off the face of the earth, mate. Kai looked down at his shuffling feet and stuck his hands in his pockets of his jeans. Ian put his hand on Kai's shoulder. Elder Fitzpatrick cleared his throat. Ian remembered where he was and who he was with and took a step back, including his companion in the small circle. Guys, I want you to meet Elder Fitzpatrick, my missionary companion. Ian clapped him on the back lightly. This is Kai Burton, Gary Owens, and Andy Smith, my best mates. They're like brothers to me. Kai lifted his chin. Gary narrowed his eyes, and Andy grunted. It's very nice to meet all of you, Elder Fitzpatrick said. None of them reached forward to shake each other's hands. The disdain within the circle was almost palpable. It was as if his pals blamed Elder Fitzpatrick for stealing Ian away from them. Gary broke the silence. Ian, what's up with the nerd glasses? You've always had perfect vision. Ian pulled the disguise from his face and handed them to Gary. They're non-prescription. What's up with your hair? Andy rubbed his hand across Ian's crew cut. You look like you're about to join the service. It's so dark, too. What are you doing? Coloring it? Why? Isn't it obvious? Kai asked. He doesn't want anyone to recognize him. Why don't you want anyone to recognize you? Elder Fitzpatrick creased his eyebrows and looked at Ian. His eyes traveled to each of their faces, then back to Ian's. I'm sort of, Ian stammered. He's a rock star, Kai scoffed. You honestly didn't know? Ian looked down at the floor and shoved his hands into his pants pocket. He raised his shoulders and cringed as he glanced up at his companion. He's the lead singer in our band, Andy explained. He writes all of our music. We can't go back on stage without him. Gary sounded like he was stating the obvious. Are you, Elder Fitzpatrick gulped, well known? New Artist of the Year at the American Music Awards 2 years ago, Andy said. Ian almost heard the duh at the end of Andy's statement. Nominated for Best Rock Group at Teen Choice Awards last year. Kai stuck his chest out and raised his chin. We were just starting to take off and then he left us, Gary sneered. Why doesn't anyone recognize you? Elder Fitzpatrick took a step back and looked at each of them in turn. I barely recognize him, and I've known him since grade school, Andy said. Well, I'd recognize him from across a stadium if he was singing. Kai's compliment halted the conversation, and he and Ian locked eyes. Ian's throat tightened and his breath caught. I miss you guys, too. Ian stepped forward and reached one arm around Kai's shoulders and the other around Gary's. Come here, Andy. The four guys of Buxton Peak wrapped their arms around each other's shoulders and put their heads together in their traditional group hug. It had been a year since they'd been together, and would be another whole year before they would do this again. But for just a moment, they were whole. It's only 12 more months. Ian's whisper carried the authority of his leadership. We can get through this, and then we're going to make headlines together, okay? We need you at home, Gary said. God needs me here, Ian replied, and I'm going to serve him to the best of my ability for 1 more year. You guys practice and rest, because we're going to get busy when I get home. Jeremy promised he's going to have all kinds of performances lined up, and we've already recorded the songs for the new CD. I'm sure the studio already has them edited and ready to go live on iTunes as soon as we're ready to release them. Stay out of trouble between now and then, okay? Not making any promises on that one, Gary chuckled. And Gary? What, Ian? Quit smoking pot. I can smell it on your jacket. Humph, Gary grunted. Not making any promises there either. Ian sighed and shook his head in discontentment. All right, we can say it once if you hold it to a whisper. You ready? 3 other heads nodded. Let's rock, they whispered in unison, and then they stepped back and dropped their arms from each other's shoulders. When Ian turned away, he almost ran right into Bishop Roberts. Elder Taylor, would you care to introduce me to your friends? Bishop Roberts. Ian hesitated and then spoke quickly and dismissively. These are my best pals from back home, Kai, Andy, and Gary. My daughter will be sorry she's away at university, Bishop Roberts said, raising his eyebrows. She probably would have liked to have gotten your autographs. Ian chuckled. Well, gee, maybe I can get her tickets to our next concert, a year from now. These guys were just leaving. Ian pushed his band members toward the door. A small group of young women huddled a few feet away, and a dozen other members of the congregation watched with wide eyes. Some even had gaping mouths. Ian's face warmed. He continued shoving his friends toward the door. "Hello, beautiful." Kai shifted toward a particular young woman whose eyes were locked onto his, a small smile playing across her pouty lips. "Don't even think about it, Kai." Ian grabbed his arm and insistently pulled him along. As he hurried out the door, Ian stopped to pick up one of the bulletins lying on a table by the door. Ian caught Elder Fitzpatrick's hesitant gaze and then lifted his chin, urging him to follow. Together, they herded the band members out of the building and into the parking lot. Before the guys climbed into Andy's car, Ian pulled out a pen and clicked it open. He handed the pen and bulletin to Kai. "Here, sign this for Bishop's daughter." Kai leaned over the hood of the car and signed his name on the back of the bulletin in scrawling letters. Then he handed it to Gary and then Andy. When finally it was back in Ian's hands, he held the pen over the paper and hesitated. With resolution, he signed it. Elder Taylor. "Elder Taylor, we have a challenge." Bishop Roberts looked across his desk, through his half spectacles, and pursed his lips. He sighed and removed his glasses, brushing his hand through his thinning hair. Ian knew this was serious. His mission president didn't normally stop by on an unannounced visit on a Wednesday afternoon. It was even rarer for him to call a special meeting with the local bishop. Ian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and gripped the sides of his head. A queasy feeling came over him, and beads of sweat gathered on his forehead. "You're not in trouble, Elder Taylor." President Jones patted Ian on the shoulder and tried to pull him back upright. "You haven't done anything wrong." "Why do I feel this has something to do with my mates showing up here last week?" Ian turned his head toward President Jones without actually sitting up. "It does, actually." "I told them not to come. They just didn't understand what kind of chaos they would leave in their wake. They didn't know I was disguising my identity or showing up would blow my cover. They didn't know. They didn't know." Ian lowered his head into his hands and shut his eyes. He thought, "Please don't send me home. Please don't send me home." "Did you see how many people showed up at church on Sunday?" Bishop Roberts stood from his desk and began pacing the small office. "Did you know the phone has been ringing off the hook for the past week and a half? There are dozens of voicemails I don't even have time to scroll through to find the important messages because they're all a bunch of girls requesting that missionaries come to their home and teach them the gospel. I don't know what to do about all this. I didn't know you were some famous rock and roll junkie." "Junkie?" Ian lifted his gaze and looked his bishop in the eye. "I am, and have always been, completely sober. All my life. I am not a junkie." "Well, your friends are." "That's not fair," Ian said, turning to his mission president. "I have focused on teaching the gospel. I've been a good missionary. You can't send me home." "I know you have, Elder Taylor." President Jones had compassion in his voice, and something else. Humor? Teasing? "I've actually been very impressed with how well you've controlled the situation." "Wait." Bishop Roberts stopped pacing. "You've known about all this? And you didn't tell me?" "Of course I have," President Jones said. "The church has taken special precautions, and we didn't want you to treat him any differently than any other missionaries just because he's a celebrity." "Well, I hope you have a plan on how to deal with this situation now that people know who he is." President Roberts let the statement hang in the air. "I do have a plan. First, the only place he will teach lessons is here at the church building, and always with a member of the church president as a chaperone." "We all have jobs, you know." "Not all of you." President Jones hesitated. "We've already called 2 retired couples as service missionaries, and they will be alternating to help out as needed." "That didn't take you long," Ian said. "Have you been preparing for this?" "Of course. I've always suspected there was a possibility this would happen." President Jones chuckled and clapped Ian on the back. "I have no idea how you've gone this long without anyone recognizing you." "Actually, one person has recognized me." Ian grinned and wrinkled his nose. "Elder Williams," Ian and President Jones said at the same time. "You knew? How?" I could tell by the way he smirks at you from across the room, and the knowing grin that passes between the two of you every time you clasp each other's hands in greeting. It was that obvious? Funny you should mention, Elder Williams. President Jones started. He rose from his chair and opened the door to the bishop's office. I happen to have brought him and his now former companion with me today. Ian and Bishop Roberts watched expectantly as President Jones waved Elder Williams in the door. The large missionary towered over President Jones as he brushed past and sat next to Ian, smacking him a low-five greeting as he sat down. Ian understood how President Jones had picked up on their mutual understanding. Neither of them could keep the grin off their faces. Ian felt a little prick of optimism. Elder Taylor, allow me to introduce your new companion, Elder Williams. President Jones clapped him on the shoulder. Yes, Ian thought. He fought the urge to jump up and do a fist pump in the air. Instead, he nodded and bit his lips, hoping his smile wasn't too big. President Jones chuckled and sat next to Ian. So what? You think providing Ian with a bodyguard is going to solve all of our problems? Bishop Roberts opened his arms and raised his eyebrows. You need to be careful to refer to him as Elder Taylor, President Jones warned. What about all the phone calls and girls showing up? What about all the voicemails? I don't have time to deal with all this. I've already asked one of our service missionaries, Sister Ross, to carefully sort through the voicemails and provide you with a list of messages and return the phone calls to all of the people who will have requested a visit from the missionaries. Sister Ross will schedule all the appointments, and so now you've also provided him with a bodyguard and a secretary? President Jones sat back, steepled his hands, and raised his eyebrows. So what is the real problem here? That you were kept out of the loop, or that this is an inconvenience for you? Bishop Roberts pursed his lips as he stammered for an answer. Shouldn't the more important issue here be that dozens of people are requesting more information about the gospel? President Jones asked. That a young man who previously had been involved in questionable lifestyle practices? Questionable? Ian interrupted. President Jones held up a hand to shush Ian and continued. A young man who had been entrenched in a lifestyle that included inappropriate behavior. President Jones paused and looked pointedly at Ian. Regardless of the fact that he was not participating in inappropriate behaviors, he was writing about them, has now turned his life over to God to teach about Jesus Christ here in our little corner of the vineyard. Shouldn't those really be the more important questions to ask? I suppose you're right. Bishop Roberts looked away and began picking at his cuticles. I guess I could be inconvenienced for a few weeks. Months, President Jones corrected. He sat forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and looked at each of them in turn. Are we all in agreement with the terms of this plan? Gee, should I get my attorney involved before I sign on to this? Ian joked and sat back, crossing his arms. You have your own attorney? Elder Williams snickered. I've had an attorney on retainer since I was 15 years old, Ian said. I didn't realize you were serious. Well, I was teasing about getting him involved, but yes, my parents and mentors would have been doing me a disservice to not provide me with representation. You've changed, Elder Taylor. Bishop Roberts finally seemed at peace with the situation. You're not the same boy you were 2 weeks ago. No, I'm the same man I was a year ago, before I started this charade. Maybe now I can finally start serving the Lord to my full ability, Ian said. I look forward to being a part of that. Bishop Roberts came around from behind his desk and offered a hand. Ian rose and clasped the bishop's hand, looking him in the eye. I'm thankful for your leadership. Ian nodded his head. And I'm extremely grateful God called me on a mission. Welcome to the mission field, Elder Taylor, Bishop Roberts said. Welcome to the mission field. Okay, that is the end of chapter 13. I hope that if you're liking these videos that you will give them a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and share these videos on social media so that others can find them as well. Next time we will start into chapter 14, which is called Center Stage.